I rescued a giant Apache girl. Then her chiefs arrived with a decision that shook my life. It was one of those bright, clear mornings when the desert seemed endless, stretching like a golden sea under the sun. The wind was warm but gentle, carrying the smell of dry earth and distant wildflowers. The protagonist, a traveler who often wandered far from cities and towns, had been walking for hours, enjoying the silence and the calm that only remote places could bring. The rocky canyon he was passing through was quiet, almost too quiet, and he felt a strange mix of excitement and caution. He had explored many deserts before, but there was something unusual about this place, something that made him pay closer attention to every sound and shadow. As he climbed over a jagged rock formation, a sudden loud cry echoed through the canyon. It wasn't the cry of an animal, nor did it sound like any human voice he had ever heard before. It was a mixture of fear, pain, and desperation that made his heart race. The traveler froze for a moment, listening carefully. The sound came again, louder and closer this time, bouncing off the cliffs in a haunting rhythm. He realized someone, or something, was in trouble, and he couldn't ignore it. Without hesitation, he ran toward the source, moving carefully over uneven stones, each step making the rocks shift and creak under his boots. The cry led him to a narrow crevice in the canyon, where the rocks had fallen recently, forming a small pile that blocked part of the path. And there, trapped under the weight of the stones, was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. At first he thought it might be a child, but as he looked closer, he realized she was much larger than any ordinary human girl. Her hands exposed under the rocks were enormous, and even the small part of her face that he could see was striking, with sharp, intelligent eyes full of fear and confusion. She was clearly in pain, struggling to free herself, but her size made it impossible to move the stones alone. The traveler didn't think twice. He dropped his bag and rushed to the rocks, gripping them with all his strength. They were heavy, larger than what he could lift easily, but he shifted them inch by inch, sweat running down his face under the hot sun. His arms ached, his legs trembled, but the girl's frightened eyes kept him going. Every time she tried to push the rocks herself, he encouraged her, telling her to stay still and not hurt herself further. He didn't know what he would do if he failed, but he couldn't leave her trapped. After what felt like an eternity, with one final heave, the largest rock rolled off, and she was free. She stood slowly, towering above him, her long hair falling around her shoulders like a dark curtain. She looked down at him with wide eyes, and he felt a mix of awe and fear. She was much taller than anyone he had ever seen, and her presence was almost magical, as if she belonged to a world far different from his own. Despite her size, she didn't make a threatening move. Instead, she looked vulnerable, cautious, and deeply grateful. She spoke, but her voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried a strength that surprised him. He realized that despite her fear and the pain from being trapped, she had control over herself, control over her emotions, and perhaps even control over him in some way. The traveler stepped back, unsure of what to do next. He offered her some water from his bottle, and after a long pause, she accepted it, drinking carefully while keeping her eyes on him. He noticed how careful she was, how her movements were deliberate despite her size, showing that she had learned to move through the world in a way that respected her strength. They sat there for a while in silence, the sun casting long shadows on the canyon walls. The traveler's mind raced with questions. Who was she? How had she come to be here alone? Was she really a human or something else entirely? But he didn't ask. He realized that right now the most important thing was her safety, and asking questions could scare her away. As they stayed together, he observed her closely. Her eyes were striking, dark and deep, reflecting a life of hardship and solitude. Her hands, though enormous, were delicate in the way she held them, and her feet, which had moved so carefully over the rocks, were steady and strong. He noticed small details, the way she touched the ground lightly as if testing it, the way she flinched at sudden movements, and the quiet way she seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the canyon. It was clear that she had survived alone in a harsh environment, relying on her strength, intelligence, and careful observation of the world around her. Gradually, a bond began to form between them. The traveler didn't know how to explain it, but there was a trust in the way she stayed nearby without fleeing, and in the way he felt responsible for her safety. He knew that any wrong move could frighten her or make her defensive, so he stayed calm, spoke softly, and avoided sudden gestures. Over time, she began to relax a little, letting him help her stretch her arms and legs after being trapped for so long. She nodded or smiled slightly, small gestures that seemed huge to him given the situation. The canyon, which had felt ominous at first, now seemed like a place where two very different beings could meet without danger. As the day went on, he realized that the girl was not only physically extraordinary but also intelligent and aware. She asked him questions, not with words at first, but through gestures and expressions, and he answered as best he could, showing kindness and patience. He learned that she had been living apart from others, in secret, to protect herself from people who might not understand her. She had a deep connection to the land, moving in ways that showed she could navigate it easily. Even with her size, the traveler felt humbled. Despite all the strength and courage he had thought he possessed, he recognized that she had lived a life far more challenging than his own, filled with isolation and survival against odds he could barely imagine. The sun began to lower, casting a golden glow across the canyon walls. The traveler knew he couldn't leave her there overnight, but he also realized she might not trust him enough to go anywhere with him yet. So, they stayed put for a while, sharing the little food and water he had brought. He told her stories in simple words, stories of the world outside the canyon, of cities and people, and he watched her eyes light up with curiosity. She listened intently, occasionally nodding or pointing to the canyon around her, as if comparing his stories with her own experiences. He realized that this moment, this quiet connection between two strangers, was something rare and valuable. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the traveler understood that he had entered a story far bigger than he had imagined. He had rescued someone extraordinary, but in doing so, he had also entered a world of mysteries, traditions, and dangers that he had never known. The girl, though silent most of the evening, stayed close, leaning slightly against a rock while keeping watch with her sharp eyes. It was clear she trusted him enough to remain nearby, yet she remained cautious, aware of the dangers the night could bring. The traveler felt a mixture of pride, relief, and nervous anticipation. He knew that this encounter was only the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. As darkness fell and stars appeared in the clear desert sky, the traveler prepared a small campfire. The girl watched from a distance at first, but gradually she inched closer, curious about the warmth and light. He offered her a small piece of bread, and she took it with a quiet nod. For the first time since their meeting, she seemed at peace. The traveler realized that the giant Apache girl, despite her size and strength, had been as vulnerable as anyone could be in that moment, and he understood that his role was not just to protect her physically, but to respect her world, her feelings, and her trust. That night, under the vast desert sky, the traveler lay near the fire, listening to the occasional rustle of wind through the rocks and the soft breathing of the girl nearby. He thought about the day's events, how a single cry had led him to someone extraordinary, how courage and compassion had brought them together, and how the journey ahead was uncertain but filled with possibility. He knew that he had changed already, that rescuing her was only the start of a story far bigger than he could imagine, a story of friendship, trust, and challenges that would test both of them in ways he had never experienced. And so, as the night deepened and the canyon grew quiet, the traveler and the giant Apache girl rested, two strangers brought together by chance, preparing unknowingly for the adventure that was about to unfold. The morning sun rose slowly over the canyon, painting the rocks with shades of gold and pink. The traveler woke to the sound of gentle rustling, realizing that the giant Apache girl was already awake. She was standing a few steps away, her enormous frame silhouetted against the soft light. She watched him quietly, her eyes reflecting the calm of the desert morning and a hint of curiosity. For the first time, he noticed small details about her face, how her features were both strong and gentle, how her eyes carried wisdom far beyond her years, and how her presence felt larger than life, yet not threatening. He rose carefully, not wanting to startle her, and offered her some water and food for the morning. She accepted silently, and they shared a simple meal together. Though they had not spoken much in words, a quiet understanding had formed between them. The traveler realized that trust was building slowly, like a small seed growing in the desert. It was fragile, but it was there. He decided that today they would spend time together, not rushing anything, just learning each other's ways and strengths. After breakfast, he gently suggested they move to a safer part of the canyon, a small plateau with flat rocks where it would be easier to walk and rest. The girl hesitated at first, looking at the path carefully. She tested the ground with her large, strong feet, making sure it could support her weight. The traveler followed behind, offering small reassurances. Step by step they moved together, learning a rhythm. He marveled at her balance and grace. Despite her enormous size, she moved with care, almost as if the desert itself guided her steps. As they walked, he tried to communicate more with her. At first, it was simple gestures and hand signals. He pointed to the sun, then to himself, then to her, trying to convey that they were just sharing a journey together. She watched closely, her head tilting slightly as if understanding, then responded with small gestures of her own. She mimicked some of his movements, and soon they were creating a small language between themselves. It was fascinating to the traveler. He had never had to communicate so carefully, yet it felt natural, as if the canyon itself encouraged this quiet connection. By mid-morning they reached the plateau. It was a flat area with a few scattered boulders and patches of desert plants. The girl sat down carefully, her legs folding in a way that seemed almost impossible for someone of her size. She looked at him expectantly, as if inviting him to sit as well. He did, keeping a safe distance so she would not feel crowded. He noticed how alert she remained, constantly scanning the environment with her sharp eyes. Even when resting, she was aware of every sound and movement. He admired her alertness. It was clear that her life in isolation had taught her to notice everything, to never let her guard down completely. The traveler decided to help her relax a little. He pointed to a small rock nearby and tapped it, showing her that it was safe. She watched, then cautiously moved a similar rock with her hands, testing the weight. He nodded encouragingly. Slowly she began to smile, a small, shy smile that lit up her enormous face. It was a moment of connection that made the traveler's heart warm. He realized that trust was not only about safety, but also about sharing small joys, little victories, and gentle reassurance. After a while, the girl began to move around the plateau, testing the space. The traveler observed quietly, giving her freedom to explore while remaining close enough to assist if needed. She discovered small plants, rocks, and even a tiny stream of water trickling through the plateau. She touched them carefully, examining each with curiosity. He watched her in awe. Her perspective was so different, yet her fascination was similar to what any curious child might feel. It reminded him that despite her size, she was still a young person learning about the world, experiencing wonder in her own unique way. As the morning passed, he tried talking to her more directly. He pointed to himself and said his name slowly, then pointed to her and waited. She hesitated, but then repeated a sound, something like a soft ah, mimicking the syllable he had spoken. He smiled and nodded. It was not much, but it was a start. He realized that communication was less about words and more about patience, attention, and respect. Every small interaction mattered. Every gesture of trust built a bridge between them. Around midday, the sun grew stronger, and the plateau became hot underfoot. The traveler suggested resting in the shade of a large rock formation nearby. She agreed, moving carefully to avoid stepping on anything fragile. As they rested, he offered her some food again, and she accepted, eating slowly. He noticed that she ate differently than anyone he had ever seen, carefully, deliberately, making sure not to waste anything. It reminded him that living in the desert, in isolation, had taught her the importance of using every resource wisely. The traveler felt a growing admiration for her resilience. She had survived in a harsh, lonely environment, relying only on her strength, intelligence, and instincts. Yet despite her challenges, she was not bitter or angry. She was cautious, wise, and gentle. He realized that her character had been shaped by both hardship and care, and he felt honored to witness it. At the same time, he felt a responsibility. He had rescued her, but now he needed to continue earning her trust, step by step. In the afternoon, they walked together to explore a small hidden area near the plateau. The traveler pointed to a small pool of water, clear and cool, and gestured for her to approach. She looked hesitant, then slowly stepped closer. The water reflected her enormous figure, shimmering in the sunlight. She seemed fascinated, touching the water lightly and watching the ripples spread. The traveler smiled, understanding that small wonders could build connection. He knelt by the water, showing her that he would not harm it or her, and slowly she began to relax even more. Throughout the day, he observed how she interacted with the environment. She had a unique way of moving through the desert, almost like she belonged there. Every step was careful but confident. She could balance on narrow rocks, move quickly when needed, and seemed to anticipate dangers before they happened. The traveler realized that her size was only one part of her. Her intelligence, awareness, and experience were equally extraordinary. He felt lucky to witness such a rare combination of strength and wisdom. As the afternoon faded, the traveler decided it was time to prepare for the evening. He set up a small area for resting, placing a few rocks to make a safe space for her near the plateau. She observed quietly, then slowly settled into the spot, her large frame fitting surprisingly well. He sat nearby, keeping a safe distance, and began a quiet conversation about the day. Using simple gestures and words, he asked if she was comfortable, if she felt safe, and if she wanted him to stay close. She nodded or made small sounds, confirming her feelings. Each response strengthened the fragile trust between them. The evening arrived, painting the canyon in warm orange and pink hues. The traveler noticed that the giant Apache girl had begun to open up more. She played with small rocks, arranging them carefully, and occasionally looked at him, as if seeking approval or acknowledgement. He smiled, responding with small nods and encouraging gestures. It was a silent conversation, yet it carried more meaning than words ever could. He realized that this was more than just a rescue. It was a connection, a bridge between two worlds that had never met before. As the stars began to appear in the night sky, the traveler and the girl sat quietly, listening to the soft sounds of the desert. Crickets chirped, a distant owl hooted, and the canyon seemed alive with subtle movement. She leaned slightly against a rock, resting after the long day, and he felt a deep sense of respect for her. She had faced loneliness, danger, and uncertainty every day of her life, yet she remained kind, cautious, and curious. He understood that his role was not only to protect her physically but also to honor her spirit, her intelligence, and her trust. Before sleeping, he offered her some water and food one last time. She accepted, then rested quietly, keeping watch with her sharp eyes even as she lay down. He realized that trust and understanding could grow slowly, like water slowly carving its way through stone. He felt proud, humbled, and honored to be part of her story, even for a short time. That night the canyon was peaceful, yet full of possibilities, as if the land itself was aware that something extraordinary had begun. As he drifted to sleep near the plateau, he thought about the day's lessons. The giant Apache girl had taught him patience, observation, and the power of quiet understanding. He realized that their bond was fragile but strong, built on respect, care, and shared experience. He knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that this connection was rare and precious, a moment in life that would shape him forever. And so, under the endless stars of the desert, the traveler and the giant Apache girl rested together. Two very different lives intertwined for the first time, preparing for the next day of trust, discovery, and adventure. The next morning the traveler woke to a clear sky, the desert air crisp and quiet. The giant Apache girl was already awake, standing near the edge of the plateau. She watched the horizon, her large silhouette framed by the rising sun. She seemed calm, yet alert, as if sensing the journey ahead. The traveler, packing his small bag, felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He knew that today they would begin the journey back toward her tribe, and with it, challenges that neither of them could yet imagine. He approached her slowly, careful not to startle her. She turned to him, her expression serious but not unfriendly, as if acknowledging that the day ahead would be important. He gestured for her to follow him, pointing to a path that led down from the plateau toward the canyon floor. She hesitated, her eyes scanning the rocky terrain, testing the ground with her feet. Step by step she began moving, and he followed behind. The canyon was narrower in places, the rocks sharp and uneven, and the traveler realized that guiding someone of her size through this terrain would be more difficult than he had expected. Still, she moved gracefully, balancing carefully on the stones, her experience in the wilderness evident in every step. The traveler felt a growing respect for her strength, agility, and awareness. As they moved through the canyon, the traveler noticed small signs of life. Birds calling from the cliffs, lizards scurrying over rocks, and the occasional desert plants swaying in the wind. He pointed them out to the girl, and she watched attentively, sometimes touching the plants, sometimes crouching to observe small insects. Though she was enormous, her curiosity was gentle, careful not to harm the fragile ecosystem around her. The traveler realized that she had not only survived in the desert, but had done so with respect for the land and its creatures. He admired her deeply, understanding that her size was only one part of her extraordinary nature. Around mid-morning they encountered a narrow ravine filled with loose stones. The traveler stopped, pointing to the ground and demonstrating how to step carefully to avoid slipping. The girl watched him closely, then tested the stones with her massive feet. She moved slowly at first, then picked up speed as she gained confidence. He followed, making sure to stay close in case of danger. It was a delicate dance of trust and communication, and he felt proud of the understanding they had built. Despite their differences, they were learning to move as a team, each respecting the other's strengths and limitations. During a short break, the traveler offered the girl some food. She accepted, eating slowly, and he noticed how carefully she handled it. She seemed to appreciate every bite, a reminder of the discipline and care that her life in isolation had taught her. As they rested, he tried to communicate more, using simple words and gestures. He asked where her tribe was, and she pointed toward the distant cliffs, then made a motion indicating a small village hidden in the rocks. He nodded, understanding that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to see it through. As the sun climbed higher, the traveler noticed that the girl seemed more relaxed, moving with confidence and occasionally glancing back at him as if checking on his progress. He realized that their journey was teaching them both patience and resilience. She had lived a life of solitude, relying on herself for survival, and now she was learning to trust another human being. He, in turn, was learning to navigate a world that was unfamiliar and sometimes intimidating, guided by someone far stronger and wiser in the ways of the land than he could ever be. By early afternoon, they reached a small clearing where the desert opened into a wider valley. The traveler suggested resting in the shade of a few scattered rocks, and the girl agreed. She lowered herself carefully, folding her massive legs beneath her. He settled nearby, keeping a respectful distance. They shared some water and food again, and the traveler noticed how her eyes scanned the environment constantly, a habit born of years in the wilderness. She seemed calm but never careless, a reminder that survival was not just about strength, but also about awareness and caution. While they rested, the traveler took the opportunity to learn more about her life. Using gestures and simple words, he asked questions about where she had been, what she had seen, and how she had survived alone. She responded with gestures, pointing to the cliffs, the valley, and the distant mountains, showing him the paths she had traveled. He marveled at her knowledge, realizing that her size and strength were matched by intelligence and experience. Every motion she made was deliberate, every glance thoughtful, and he understood that she had faced countless challenges and had overcome them through courage and cleverness. After the break, they continued their journey. The terrain became more rugged with larger rocks and steeper inclines. The traveler found himself relying on the girl's instincts and guidance. She would pause, examine the path ahead, and then move forward confidently. He followed, careful to match her pace and avoid mistakes that could cause injury. They encountered small animals along the way, which she observed silently, almost respectfully. He realized that she had a deep connection to the natural world, one that he had never experienced. Her life had been shaped by the land, and in turn she had shaped her movements and decisions around it. As the afternoon wore on, they approached a small desert village. The traveler noticed how the girl's demeanor changed. She became more alert, her posture straighter, her eyes scanning the surroundings. He understood that they were approaching her tribe. She moved cautiously, leading him along hidden paths and narrow trails that he would have missed without her guidance. It was clear that she knew this land intimately, and he felt a mixture of admiration and humility. He realized that she had lived in a world where every step mattered. Every decision could mean safety or danger, and now she was allowing him to share a part of that world with her. Along the way, they faced challenges. A sudden storm blew through the canyon, strong winds rattling the rocks and sand whipping against their skin. The traveler struggled to keep his balance, but the girl moved steadily, using her size and strength to shield him from the worst of it. He realized that her presence was not just a blessing, but a necessity. Without her, he might have been injured or lost. The storm passed after a short while, leaving the canyon refreshed and calm, and they continued their journey, both grateful for the shelter the rocks provided. As the sun began to lower, they reached a large rock formation that marked the outskirts of the tribe's territory. The girl paused, looking back at the traveler. For a moment, there was a silent conversation between them, a mix of gratitude, respect, and unspoken understanding. She then nodded, indicating that he should follow her. Step by step they moved toward the hidden village, navigating the final obstacles with care and focus. The traveler felt a growing sense of anticipation and nervousness, knowing that meeting the tribe would bring new challenges, rules, and traditions he could not yet imagine. Finally, as evening approached, they reached a quiet clearing where the village lay hidden among the cliffs. Smoke rose from small fires and he could see figures moving between rock formations. The girl stopped, turning to him. He could see her expression, serious, cautious, yet calm. She gestured for him to wait while she moved ahead slightly, approaching the figures. The traveler watched, heart pounding, as the tribe noticed her and began to gather. The air was filled with tension and curiosity, and he realized that the moment of truth had arrived. The girl returned, signaling him to follow. As they entered the village, the traveler could feel the eyes of the tribe upon them. He noticed their strength, their expression serious but not hostile. He realized that he was stepping into a world governed by traditions, rules, and authority far different from his own. He felt a mix of fear, respect, and awe. Yet he knew that he had earned the girl's trust, and that bond would guide him through whatever came next. The journey back to her tribe had tested their courage, patience, and trust, and now they stood on the threshold of a new chapter, one that would challenge both of them in ways he could not yet predict. That night, as they camped on the edge of the village under a sky full of stars, the traveler reflected on the day. He thought about how far they had come, the obstacles they had overcome, and the bond that had grown between him and the giant Apache girl. He realized that their journey was not just physical, but also emotional and spiritual, a bridge between two very different worlds. He understood that tomorrow, when they met the chiefs, the real test of character, trust, and courage would begin. And he felt ready, strengthened by the lessons of the day and the extraordinary presence of the girl he had rescued. The morning air was calm and cool as the traveler and the giant Apache girl prepared to enter the heart of her village. The canyon around them seemed to hold its breath, as if it too were waiting for what was about to unfold. The girl moved with quiet confidence, her large steps measured yet graceful. Back, she led the traveler carefully along the hidden paths she knew so well, paths that weaved between rock formations and small streams, keeping them out of view from anyone who might be passing by. He followed her closely, trying to match her pace, but knowing that her size and agility made even difficult terrain seem easy. As they approached a larger clearing in the village, the traveler noticed movement ahead. A group of men and women appeared, moving with authority and purpose. Their eyes were sharp, their posture proud and commanding. The traveler realized with a mixture of awe and nervousness that these were the chiefs of the tribe. They were the leaders, the decision-makers, and the guardians of every rule. every tradition, every life in this hidden community. Their expressions were serious, and the traveler felt the weight of their gaze settle on him. For the first time, he understood that his role in this story was about to be tested in ways he could not yet imagine. The giant Apache girl stopped, standing tall and calm. She bowed her head slightly in respect, a gesture of honor that spoke volumes about the customs of her people. The chiefs murmured among themselves, their voices low and steady, and then one stepped forward. He was an older man, his face lined with years of experience and wisdom. He spoke, though the traveler could not understand every word. The girl responded carefully, her voice quiet but firm, showing respect without fear. It was clear that a serious discussion was taking place, a decision being weighed that would affect not only the traveler, but the entire course of their lives. The traveler felt a wave of nervousness. He did not know what was expected of him, or what consequences his actions might bring. He stayed quiet, keeping his hands visible and his posture humble. He realized that in this moment he could not rely on strength or cleverness alone. He needed patience, respect, and understanding. He watched as the chiefs observed him, their eyes sharp, analyzing every movement, every subtle gesture. It felt as though the entire village was holding its breath, waiting for the outcome of a decision that was far beyond his control. After a long moment, the girl turned to him and gestured, inviting him to speak. He hesitated, unsure of what to say, but then found his voice. Using simple words, he expressed his intentions, that he had rescued her out of concern for her safety, that he had no desire to harm or disrupt the tribe, and that he hoped to show respect for their customs. His words were careful, honest, and humble. The chiefs listened silently, their faces impassive, giving nothing away. The traveler felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He realized that trust, which had taken days to build with the girl, now needed to extend to her people. One of the chiefs stepped closer, speaking slowly and deliberately. Though the traveler could not understand every word, the tone was clear. A test would be required. According to the tribe's customs, any outsider who formed a bond with one of their protected individuals, especially someone as extraordinary as the giant Apache girl, must demonstrate their character, loyalty, and respect for the tribe. The traveler understood the gravity of this moment. This was more than a challenge. It was a rite of passage, a measure of whether he could truly belong in some way to the world he had entered. The girl watched him carefully, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and encouragement. She made small gestures, letting him know that she trusted him to handle this moment with care. The traveler nodded, understanding that he would have to remain calm, honest, and patient. The chiefs then outlined the expectations. He would be observed, tested through a series of tasks and interactions, and judged not only by his actions but by his intentions. Failure could mean that he would have to leave immediately, severing the bond he had formed with the girl. Success, however, could allow him to remain as a trusted ally and friend. The first test came quickly. The chiefs asked him to demonstrate his respect for the land and the tribe's traditions. The traveler was guided to a small sacred area, marked by stones and plants carefully arranged by the villagers. He was expected to handle each object with care, showing awareness of their significance. As he moved through the area, the chiefs watched intently, nodding occasionally when he showed patience and reverence. The giant Apache girl observed from nearby, her expression calm but attentive, silently supporting him with her presence. The traveler felt a sense of focus he had never experienced before. Every step mattered, every motion carried weight, and he moved deliberately, aware that this was about more than him. It was about honor, trust, and respect. After successfully completing the first task, the chiefs introduced the next test. It involved demonstrating courage and compassion, qualities that the tribe valued above all else. The traveler was led to a small obstacle course of sorts, designed to challenge his strength, balance, and decision-making. Rocks had been arranged in tricky formations, narrow ledges required careful steps, and a few small animals had been placed along the path to test his reaction. The challenge was not to rush through, but to navigate with care, showing that he could protect both himself and others without fear or recklessness. The traveler moved carefully, following the path, observing the animals and avoiding sudden movements that might harm them. The chiefs watched, nodding in approval as he showed patience and thoughtfulness. The giant Apache girl walked alongside him, demonstrating trust and guiding him silently when a step was too tricky. The traveler felt a deep sense of connection, not only to her but to the tribe itself. He realized that this test was more than physical. It was about proving the strength of his heart, his character, and his respect for life, in all its forms. By late afternoon, the final test began. The chiefs asked him to show his loyalty to the girl and to the tribe. They presented him with a situation designed to test his instincts, his judgment, and his integrity. A small scenario was set up, a problem that required him to make a careful decision, balancing the needs of the girl, the tribe, and himself. The traveler considered every option, thinking carefully before acting. He remembered the lessons of the previous days, the patience, observation, and respect he had learned from the girl, the quiet guidance she had provided, and the understanding of the land and its people. He acted with thoughtfulness, solving the challenge in a way that honored the tribe's rules and protected the girl's safety. The chiefs watched silently, then exchanged looks among themselves. Slowly their expressions softened. The traveler felt a wave of relief, knowing that his actions had met the tribe's standards. The giant Apache girl approached him, her eyes bright, and made a small gesture of approval. He realized that their bond had been strengthened not just between the two of them, but between him and the entire tribe. As evening fell, the chiefs gathered to deliver their decision. The traveler stood before them, his heart pounding. The girl stood close, her large hand resting lightly on his arm, a gesture of reassurance. The head chief spoke slowly and clearly, acknowledging the traveler's courage, patience, and respect. They declared that he had passed the tests, proving that he was worthy of trust. While he would not become a member of the tribe in the traditional sense, he was granted the rare honor of remaining as a trusted ally and friend of the giant Apache girl. The traveler felt a mixture of relief, gratitude, and awe. He had entered a world of extraordinary people, challenges, and traditions, and had been accepted on terms of mutual respect. The girl's face lit up with a rare, joyful smile. She hugged him gently, careful not to overwhelm him with her strength. He felt an incredible sense of connection, understanding that this moment was more than a reward. It was a recognition of shared trust, courage, and understanding. The chiefs nodded approvingly, satisfied that their decision upheld the honor and safety of their tribe. The traveler realized that this experience had changed him deeply. He had learned lessons about patience, respect, empathy, and the strength that comes from understanding another person's world. That night, under the vast desert sky, the traveler and the giant Apache girl sat together near a small fire. The tribe had retreated, leaving them in quiet companionship. They shared a simple meal, and the traveler reflected on everything that had happened. The bond between them had grown stronger through trust, challenges, and mutual respect. He understood that this adventure was far from over. The days ahead would bring new experiences, new lessons, and new connections. Yet, he also realized that the foundation had been laid. Trust, courage, and respect had created a bond that could endure. As the stars sparkled above the canyon, the traveler felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had rescued someone extraordinary, but in turn, he had been rescued from ignorance of a world full of wisdom, courage, and unique strength. The giant Apache girl rested nearby, her presence calm and reassuring. He knew that their journey was just beginning, and that the lessons of the day would stay with him forever. The tribe's decision had not only validated his actions but had also shown him the importance of honor, patience, and understanding, qualities that could guide him in every challenge yet to come. And so, under the endless night sky, the traveler and the giant Apache girl sat together, two lives intertwined, preparing for the adventures, challenges, and extraordinary experiences that lay ahead, knowing that trust and courage would guide them through every trial. The morning after the chief's decision was calm and golden, the desert bathed in soft sunlight. The traveler woke with a sense of purpose and wonder. He had passed the tribe's tests, gained their trust, and earned the rare honor of being recognized as a friend and ally of the giant Apache girl. But even with this achievement, he understood that the journey was far from over. Respecting her world and her people meant living carefully, observing, and learning constantly. Today would be another day of discovery, but also one of reflection, a day to understand the deeper meaning of trust, friendship, and connection. The giant Apache girl approached him quietly, her long shadow stretching across the desert floor. She smiled, a gentle, joyful expression that lit up her face. For the first time, the traveler felt completely at ease in her presence. He realized that their bond was no longer fragile. It had been tested, proven, and strengthened by courage, patience, and mutual respect. He offered her water and food, as they had done many times before, but today it felt different. There was no fear, no hesitation, only a shared understanding and calm companionship. They began walking through the village together, exploring areas the traveler had not yet seen. The girl led him to places where children of the tribe played, laughing and learning, and he observed with awe how she interacted with them. Despite her enormous size, she moved gently, careful not to intimidate the smaller members of the tribe. The traveler realized that her strength was not only physical, but also emotional and social. She had learned to live in harmony with others, using her abilities responsibly, and he felt inspired by her example. The traveler soon noticed the chiefs observing from a distance. Their eyes were calm, approving, and respectful. They had given him the chance to prove himself, and now they were watching to see how he would carry that honor forward. He approached carefully, bowing slightly in acknowledgement of their guidance and wisdom. One of the chiefs spoke to him, words slow and deliberate, explaining that the traveler's actions had honored the tribe and the girl. They emphasized that trust was a continuous responsibility, and that his role as a friend required constant awareness, care, and respect. The traveler nodded, understanding the depth of their meaning. This was not just about passing a test, it was about living with integrity and honor every day. Later, the girl led him to the edge of the village, where the land opened into a wide valley. The sun glowed on the distant cliffs, casting long shadows over the desert floor. She paused, turning to the traveler with an expression that combined curiosity, pride, and gratitude. He realized that she was acknowledging his journey, the effort he had made, and the bond they had formed. She gestured for him to sit beside her on a flat rock, and together they looked out over the valley. The silence between them was peaceful, comfortable, and full of meaning. It was a moment of reflection and connection, a pause before the next chapter of their lives. The traveler thought back to the day he first found her trapped under the rocks. He remembered the fear in her eyes, the desperation in her cry, and the overwhelming weight of the rocks he had lifted to free her. At that moment he had acted out of instinct and compassion, but now he understood that their meeting had been the start of something far larger. It had brought him into a world filled with courage, wisdom, and extraordinary strength. It had taught him lessons about patience, observation, and empathy. He realized that rescuing her had been only the beginning. The true journey was in building trust, understanding her world, and earning a place beside her as a friend and ally. As the day progressed, the chiefs invited him to participate in daily activities of the tribe. He helped gather water from a small stream, assisted in preparing food, and observed rituals that honored their ancestors and the land. The giant Apache girl guided him carefully, explaining gestures, movements, and meanings. He realized that every action in the village carried significance, and that understanding this culture required patience, humility, and attention to detail. Each task, however simple it seemed, became a lesson in respect, observation, and care. The traveler also noticed how the girl interacted with her people. She laughed with the younger members, shared stories with the elders, and moved with quiet authority among her peers. Despite her size and strength, she was gentle and considerate. Her presence commanded respect without intimidation. The traveler felt a deep admiration for her, not just for her extraordinary abilities, but for the wisdom and empathy she demonstrated every day. He realized that she had survived and thrived in isolation because she balanced power with compassion, strength with patience, and independence with respect for others. In the late afternoon, the traveler and the girl climbed a nearby ridge to watch the sunset. The desert glowed in shades of gold, orange, and pink, and the canyon walls reflected the colors like mirrors. They sat together in silence, the wind brushing softly against their faces. The traveler felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had entered this world as a stranger, uncertain and cautious, but now he was part of something greater, a story of trust, courage, and mutual respect that transcended size, difference, and distance. The girl leaned slightly against him, and he realized that their bond had become unshakable. As darkness fell, the tribe gathered around small fires, singing songs and telling stories of their history. The traveler listened, absorbing every detail, feeling the richness of a culture he had never known. The giant Apache girl stayed close, occasionally whispering translations and explanations. He realized that he was witnessing a world built on tradition, respect, and courage, a world where every individual, no matter their size or strength, had a role and a voice. He felt honored to be included, even as an outsider, and understood the privilege of trust and acceptance. Later that evening, the chiefs called him to the central fire. They spoke quietly but clearly, acknowledging his courage, patience, and respect. They reminded him that his journey with the girl and the tribe was ongoing, and that every day would bring new challenges and lessons. The traveler nodded, understanding that trust and friendship were not static, they were living, evolving things that required care and attention. The chief's words reinforced the lessons he had learned since the day he first rescued the giant Apache girl, that courage, patience, respect, and empathy were the true measures of strength. The girl sat beside him as they returned to their resting place. He smiled softly, a rare and beautiful expression, and the traveler felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything he had experienced before. He realized that their adventure had not only tested him physically, but had shaped him emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. He had discovered qualities within himself, patience, courage, humility, that he had never fully understood until now. He had also learned the power of connection, trust, and shared experience, and he knew that these lessons would stay with him forever. That night, under a sky filled with stars, the traveler reflected on everything he had experienced. He thought of the day he had lifted the rocks to free the giant Apache girl, the hours spent building trust, the journey through the desert, and the tests set by the chiefs. Each step had been a lesson in courage, humility, and respect. He realized that his life had been forever changed not because of the challenges he had faced, but because of the relationships he had formed, the trust he had earned, and the wisdom he had gained. As he drifted to sleep beside the girl, he felt a deep sense of peace. The world was vast, full of mysteries, dangers, and wonders, but he had learned that trust, courage, and empathy could guide him through even the most extraordinary circumstances. He understood that the bond he shared with the giant Apache girl was rare and precious, a connection built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and genuine care. And he knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The next morning, the traveler awoke to find the girl already moving through the village, interacting with her people as if he had always been part of their world. He followed her, observing, learning, and participating wherever he could. Each day became a continuation of the lessons he had learned, the importance of patience, the value of observation, and the strength found in kindness and respect. The tribe accepted him as a guest, a friend, and a helper, while the girl remained a constant guide, protector, and companion. Months passed, and the traveler grew into his role. He learned the customs of the tribe, assisted with daily tasks, and explored the desert alongside the girl. Their bond became legendary among the tribe, a story of courage, trust, and extraordinary connection that inspired everyone who heard it. The traveler often reflected on the unlikely chain of events that had brought him here. A cry for help, a pile of rocks, and a decision to act with compassion. He realized that this moment had set in motion a life far richer, fuller, and more extraordinary than he had ever imagined. In the end, the traveler understood that rescuing the giant Apache girl had changed not only her life but his own. He had discovered the power of trust, the importance of patience, and the strength that comes from empathy and respect. And as he stood beside her, looking out over the canyon. He knew that their story was only beginning. An extraordinary friendship forged in the harsh desert, tempered by trust and destined to last a lifetime.